It was just another lazy Sunday morning. I was in the study, digging through the junk drawer, looking for a screwdriver to fix a loose cabinet door. You know the kind of drawer, where old receipts, half-dead batteries, and random knickknacks go to die. That's when I found it, an envelope, wedged under a bunch of papers. At first, I almost ignored it, but something about how it was tucked away caught my attention. I opened it, expecting maybe an old bill or some forgotten birthday card. Instead, it was a photo. There was my wife, Anna, standing next to my best friend, Mike. They were smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. His arm was slung over her shoulder in a way that felt off. It wasn't just a friendly pose. It was familiar, like they shared a secret I didn't know about. I stared at it for a while, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't from any event I could remember, no barbecue or party we'd all been to together. And that made it worse because it meant there were moments with them I wasn't a part of. I slid the photo back in the envelope and stuffed it in my pocket before heading out to the patio. Anna was there, curled up with her book, humming some tune she always hummed when she was in a good mood. Ethan, our youngest, was running around in the backyard chasing a butterfly. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to shake off the weird feeling, but my mind kept looping back to that photo. "You good?" Anna asked without looking up, flipping a page. "Yeah, just thinking about work stuff," I said, forcing a smile. She glanced at me then, narrowing her eyes like she didn't buy it but didn't push. And that's where it started. One photo. One moment that would crack everything open. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about that picture. Every time Anna smiled at me or laughed at something Ethan said, I'd picture her standing next to Mike, the way his hand rested on her shoulder. It wasn't just the pose, it was the look in their eyes, like they were in on something no one else knew. By the evening, I decided to bring it up, casually, of course. No accusations. Just, fishing for context. We were in the kitchen after dinner. She was drying dishes, and I was pretending to organize the pantry. "So, I was going through the drawer in the study today," I started, keeping my tone light. "Found all kinds of random stuff in there. Even an old photo of you and Mike." She didn't pause or stiffen, just kept drying the plate in her hands. "Mike?" "Oh, probably from one of the parties we had back in the day. I'm surprised you still have those." I wanted to believe her, but her answer felt too easy, too rehearsed. "Yeah, maybe. You two looked pretty close in it," I added, hoping to bait her a little. Finally, she glanced at me, her brow furrowing just a bit. "We've known each other forever, Jack. You know how he is, always in everyone's space." "Why? Is something wrong?" Her response threw me off. She sounded normal, almost too normal. "Nah, just curious," I said, waving it off. "It's been a while since we've all hung out." "Yeah, we should invite him over soon," she said, smiling. "I think he's been busy with work lately." That's when it hit me, they hadn't hung out together in months. Or at least, that's what I thought. But what if I'd missed something? The photo wasn't new. Mike hadn't been over to the house in ages. So when exactly was this taken? After Anna went to bed, I pulled out the envelope again, studying the picture under the lamp in my office. That nagging feeling wouldn't let me go. I decided I needed more answers. First step, find out exactly when and where that photo was taken. But I'd have to be careful. If Anna had secrets, I couldn't let her know I was looking for them. The next morning, while Anna was in the shower and the kids were still asleep, I pulled the photo out again. Something about it kept nagging at me, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I flipped it over, hoping for some kind of clue. And there it was, a tiny, handwritten date in the bottom right corner, May 17, 2020. It stopped me cold. That date rang a bell, but not in a good way. May 2020, that was smack in the middle of the pandemic. Everyone was home. Anna had told me her company was doing remote work. I remember she spent a lot of time on video calls in the guest room we turned into her home office. Mike, on the other hand, worked in construction. He wasn't exactly the type to drop by for no reason, especially not during a lockdown. So why would they have been together? And why hadn't I known about it? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something big. The date made things worse, not better. Now, I had to know more. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the photos in my gallery. I was hoping for a picture or even a text thread from that time that could give me context. There wasn't much, just a few shots of the kids playing in the backyard, some random memes, and a blurry picture of a burnt loaf of bread from when I tried my hand at sourdough. But then I saw it, a screenshot of Anna's calendar. It was dated May 17, 2020, and one event stood out, work retreat, day 2. That was it, her company had done one of those virtual retreats over Zoom to keep the team connected. I remember because she'd spent most of that weekend locked away in the guest room. But if she was working, why was she with Mike? The more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up. My gut was telling me I needed to dig deeper. Maybe Mike could explain, but if I confronted him too soon, it might blow up in my face. I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't let this go. That date was stuck in my head like a song on repeat. If Anna had spent the weekend in a work retreat, then how did she end up taking that photo with Mike? It wasn't adding up, and the only way to find answers was to get a little creative. That afternoon, while Anna was busy helping Ethan with his school project, I snuck into the guest room. It hadn't changed much since her home office days, same desk, same chair, even the same stack of notebooks on the shelf. My goal was to find anything, notes, emails, even a random scribble, that could connect her to Mike during that time. I rifled through the desk drawers, trying to be quick but thorough. Most of what I found was harmless, sticky notes, pens, a few old printouts of marketing reports. But then, tucked under a pile of folders, I found her planner from 2020. My hands were practically shaking as I flipped through the pages. I found the weekend of May 17th, and there it was, work retreat written in her neat handwriting. But right below that, in much smaller letters, she jotted, lunch with M. M. It didn't take a genius to figure out who that might be. My stomach dropped. I closed the planner and shoved it back where I found it, trying to steady my breathing. Lunch. During a lockdown. That wasn't normal, not even for close friends. And the way she'd written it, small and almost hidden, felt deliberate, like she didn't want anyone else to notice. When I stepped out of the room, Anna was still with Ethan, totally unaware of my little investigation. For the rest of the day, I tried to act normal, but my head was spinning. If I'd been suspicious before, now I was practically convinced that something wasn't right. That night, as she was brushing her teeth, I casually asked, "Hey, do you remember that work retreat you had in May 2020? I think it was right when the sourdough craze started." She paused, mid-brush, and gave me a puzzled look. "Yeah, vaguely." "Why?" "Just came across an old calendar reminder," I said, keeping my tone light. "Didn't you have lunch with someone during that weekend? I think it said M or something." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. "Oh, yeah," she said quickly, rinsing her mouth. "That was Michelle, one of my coworkers. We grabbed takeout and ate in the park." "Why?" I shrugged, pretending it wasn't a big deal. "No reason. Just trying to jog my memory." She smiled and kissed me goodnight, but as she walked out of the bathroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying. Michelle might be a real person, but I doubted she had anything to do with that lunch. And if Anna was lying, the real question was, why? The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I wasn't ready to confront Anna outright, at least, not yet. But if she'd lied about meeting Michelle, there was one person who could clear it up, Mike. It felt risky. If I asked the wrong question or tipped him off, it could backfire. Still, I had to take the chance. So, while Anna was out grocery shopping and the kids were distracted with their tablets, I called him. "Hey, Mike," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "How's it going?" "Jack. Long time, man." "I'm good. How about you?" "Can't complain," I lied. "Just the usual." "Actually, I was calling because I was cleaning out some old stuff and found a photo of you and Anna. Made me think we haven't all hung out in a while." There was a pause, a little too long. "Oh, yeah. What photo?" "Just one of you two together. Looked like it was from 2020. You remember that weekend in May? The one during lockdown." Another pause. This time, I could hear him exhale like he was buying time. Yeah, I think I do. We must have bumped into each other at some point. Weird time, right? Everyone was so stir-crazy. Bumped into each other? That didn't explain why they were grinning like teenagers in the photo, or why she'd written about lunch in her planner. I pushed a little harder. "Yeah, it must have been tough with everything shut down," I said. "Where was it?" "Around here." Yeah," he said, his tone shifting. He sounded nervous now. "Probably somewhere nearby. Honestly, man, it's been so long, I barely remember." Barely remembers? That wasn't the Mike I knew. The Mike I knew had the memory of an elephant and could tell you every detail of the last 10 barbecues we'd hosted. "Yeah, no worries," I said, pretending to drop it. "Just curious. We should catch up soon." "For sure," he said quickly. "Let me know when." I ended the call feeling worse than before. Something about the way he answered, or didn't answer, set off every alarm bell in my head. Mike wasn't just brushing me off. He was hiding something. I sat on the couch for a while, staring at my phone. The more I replayed the conversation in my head, the more certain I became, whatever happened that weekend, Mike wasn't going to tell me the truth. Which meant I had to find another way to get it. That afternoon, Anna was out in the yard with Ethan, and I decided to do something I'd been avoiding. I went to her laptop. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, invade her privacy like this. But at this point, I couldn't ignore the pit in my stomach. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter, unlocked. I opened it, heart pounding, and tried to move fast. If she came in, I'd need an excuse, a weak one, sure, but something. At first, everything looked normal. The usual apps, folders for work projects, even some recipe bookmarks. But then I noticed something odd, a folder titled Receipts. Not unusual on its own, but Anna wasn't the type to keep digital copies of her purchases. She preferred old-fashioned paper receipts, stuffed in a drawer or her wallet. Curious, I opened it. Inside were dozens of files with random names, IMG_4231, doc_2020, and so on. Most of them didn't mean anything to me, just scanned receipts or photos of store tags. But then I clicked on a file named hotel_invoice_May 2020. It was exactly what it sounded like, a scanned invoice from a hotel downtown. A 2-night stay. The dates? May 16th to 18th 2020. And the name on the reservation? Anna's. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. While I thought she'd been locked away at home during her work retreat, she'd been staying at a hotel. The invoice listed a room with a king-size bed and dinner for two. Dinner for two. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. This wasn't just lunch or a random meetup. This was planned. And I knew exactly who she'd been with. I copied the file to a USB drive and closed the laptop, making sure everything looked untouched. Then I headed to the bathroom to splash some water on my face, trying to steady my breathing. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. When I stepped outside, Anna waved at me from the garden, her face lit up with a carefree smile. "Hey, you okay?" she called. "Yeah," I managed to say, forcing a grin. Just needed some air. As I stood there, watching her laugh with Ethan, a part of me wanted to confront her right then and there. But I knew I needed more. If this was what it seemed, one hotel invoice wasn't enough to tear everything apart. Not yet. I had to be sure. That night, after the kids were in bed and Anna was curled up on the couch watching one of her crime dramas, I decided to take the next step. It felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross, but I needed answers, real ones. I grabbed my phone and stepped out onto the back porch, dialing a number I'd found online earlier that day. Eastside Investigations, a man answered, his voice calm and businesslike. "Hi, my name's Jack," I said, my voice low even though I was outside. "I need some help looking into something personal." "Understood," he said, no questions asked. "Do you have time to meet tomorrow? We can go over the details in person." We arranged to meet at a diner across town, far enough away that Anna wouldn't stumble upon me. As I hung up, guilt hit me like a brick. What kind of husband hires a PI to spy on his wife? But then I thought about that photo, the hotel invoice, and Mike's nervous tone on the phone. This wasn't just paranoia. Something was going on, and I needed to know the truth. The next day, I slipped out during lunch, telling Anna I was running errands. At the diner, a man named Greg introduced himself, mid-40s, dressed casually, but with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything. "What's the situation?" he asked, leaning forward over his coffee. I told him everything, the photo, the date on the back, the planner, and now the hotel invoice. Greg didn't flinch. He'd probably heard worse 100 times over. "Do you have any suspicions about who she might have been with?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, hesitating. "My best friend, Mike." He nodded, jotting something down in a notebook. "And what do you want me to find out?" "Everything," I said firmly. "If there's something going on, I need proof. And if I'm wrong," I trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "If you're wrong, you'll have peace of mind," Greg said. "Either way, I'll find out. But I'll need access to her schedule, maybe her car. Does she have any upcoming trips or plans?" I thought about it and realized she had mentioned a team-building workshop at the end of the week. "She's supposed to go out of town for work on Friday," I said. Greg's eyes lit up. "Perfect. I'll start tailing her then. In the meantime, I'll run a background check on Mike and see if there's anything unusual." I handed him a copy of the hotel invoice and left the diner feeling like I'd just set something huge into motion. That evening, Anna was packing her suitcase for the trip. I watched her from the doorway, trying to act normal while my mind raced. "Excited for the workshop?" I asked casually. "Not really," she said with a small laugh. "It's more of a formality. But at least it's just one night." I nodded, pretending to focus on something on my phone. Inside, though, I was counting the hours until Friday. Whatever happened on this trip, Greg would be watching. And soon, I'd finally know the truth. Friday arrived faster than I expected, but the hours leading up to Anna's departure crawled by. She spent most of the morning finalizing her packing, all the while humming to herself as if everything was perfectly normal. Maybe it was for her. For me, every smile, every laugh felt like a test of my patience. Around noon, she kissed Ethan and waved goodbye, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon," she said, grabbing her suitcase. "Have a safe trip," I replied, forcing a smile. As soon as the door closed behind her, my phone buzzed. It was Greg. "She just left," I said quietly. "We're already on her," Greg confirmed. "I'll keep you updated." I tried to distract myself with housework, then a run to the store, but I couldn't shake the tension. My phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and every time it buzzed, my heart jumped. By evening, Greg texted, "She's checked into a hotel downtown. Alone for now. We'll update." I stared at the words, "for now." It didn't mean anything yet, but it felt ominous. Dinner with the kids was a blur, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. When they finally went to bed, I collapsed on the couch, scrolling mindlessly on my phone while waiting for another update. At around 9:30, my phone buzzed again. Another car pulled up. Male driver. Checking plates. I sat up straight, my chest tightening. Minutes later, another message came through, "It's your friend. Mike." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. There was no denying it now. Mike was there. He wasn't there to borrow a cup of sugar or catch up on old times. He was there to see my wife. A few minutes later, Greg texted again, "They're heading into her room. Same floor. Room service delivered wine about 10 minutes ago." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My best friend and my wife, together, right under my nose. It was one thing to suspect, but seeing it confirmed like this, it was almost too much. Greg followed up with a brief phone call. "Do you want me to keep watching, or do you want me to pull back?" he asked, his voice steady. "Keep watching," I said through clenched teeth. "I want everything." The rest of the night passed in a haze. I didn't sleep. I barely moved from the couch. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured them in that room, laughing, drinking, doing God knows what. My mind wouldn't let me stop. By morning, I felt hollow, running on nothing but anger and caffeine. I knew Greg would send me a full report soon, but one thing was already clear, my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Saturday morning was cold and gray, matching the pit in my stomach. I was pacing the living room when Greg's name flashed on my phone. My hands were shaking as I picked up. "I've got everything you asked for," Greg said, his voice calm but serious. "Photos, timestamps, and enough details to paint the picture." "What exactly did you see?" I asked, my throat dry. "They spent the night together," he said bluntly. "Arrived at her room around 9:30. He left briefly in the morning, probably to grab coffee, and came back. They checked out together just after noon. It felt like a punch to the gut. Even though I'd suspected it, hearing the confirmation hit me harder than I expected. "Do you have the photos?" I managed to ask. "I'll send them over," Greg said. "But I need to warn you, they're intimate. You sure you want to see?" I hesitated, but the answer was obvious. "Send them." Minutes later, my phone buzzed again with a series of photos. I opened the first one with trembling fingers. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. Anna and Mike were walking into the hotel side by side, his hand on her lower back. Another showed them entering her room, Anna glancing over her shoulder like she didn't have a care in the world. The next photo hit me the hardest. It was the following morning, the two of them stepping out of the hotel together. Anna was smiling, holding a to-go cup of coffee in one hand while Mike carried her suitcase in the other. I closed the photos and dropped the phone on the table. My stomach churned, a toxic mix of anger and heartbreak. I felt like a fool, like the last person in the world to know what was happening in his own life. Greg's voice brought me back to reality. "What do you want to do next?" It was a good question. The evidence was there, undeniable. But I didn't just want a divorce, I wanted the truth, straight from Anna. I needed to hear her say it. "I'm going to confront her," I said finally. "But I need one more thing." "What's that?" "Find out how long this has been going on," I said. "This can't have started yesterday. I want the whole story." "You got it," Greg said. "I'll dig into their history." After we hung up, I sat there in silence, staring at the photos again. Ethan and Abby were playing in the other room, their laughter a painful reminder of what I stood to lose. My thoughts drifted to Ethan, the way his nose crinkled when he smiled, the way he had Mike's eyes. A thought I'd been avoiding crept back into my mind, louder than ever. What if Ethan wasn't mine? I sat there for what felt like hours, staring blankly at the photos Greg had sent. The anger and hurt were overwhelming, but one thought kept resurfacing, hitting me harder each time: Ethan. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The resemblance was undeniable. Ethan's laugh, the way he tilted his head when he was curious, even the way his hair curled after a bath, it was like seeing Mike as a kid. It felt impossible. Ethan was my son. I'd been there when he was born, watched him take his first steps, taught him how to kick a soccer ball. But now, staring at these photos, the cracks in my certainty were growing wider. The idea made me feel sick. I loved Ethan more than anything. If there was even a chance he wasn't mine, it would tear me apart. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of it made my chest tighten. I needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. That night, after the kids were in bed and Anna had returned home, I told her I wasn't feeling well and went straight to the guest room to sleep. Instead, I grabbed my laptop and started researching discrete paternity tests. The process was straightforward enough, just a quick swab from me and Ethan. The hard part would be getting the sample without raising suspicion. The next morning, while Anna was busy unpacking and the kids were eating breakfast, I took my chance. I grabbed one of Ethan's toothbrushes from the bathroom, sealed it in a plastic bag, and tucked it into my coat pocket. My hands were shaking the entire time, but I managed to keep my face neutral when Anna walked past. By mid-afternoon, I had mailed the samples to the lab. The results would take a few days, which felt like a lifetime. In the meantime, I kept my distance from Anna. She acted like everything was fine, maybe even better than fine. She hummed while she cooked, made jokes at dinner, and asked about my day like we were the perfect family. It was enough to make my blood boil. I couldn't stop replaying the hotel photos in my head. Every time she smiled at me, I wanted to scream. But I couldn't let her know what I was doing. Not yet. That night, I sat in Ethan's room, watching him sleep. His little face was so peaceful, so innocent. Whether or not the DNA matched, he was still my son. He always would be. But as I sat there, the thought that he might be Mike's son instead of mine gnawed at me like a splinter I couldn't remove. The truth was coming, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. The wait for the paternity results felt endless. Every moment dragged on, each one filled with a storm of anger, doubt, and heartbreak. I avoided Anna as much as possible, but it wasn't easy. She noticed my distance, and by Wednesday, she couldn't hold back anymore. "What's going on, Jack?" she asked after dinner, standing in the doorway to the living room while the kids played upstairs. I kept my eyes on the TV, pretending to focus on the news. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb," she said, crossing her arms. "You've been acting weird for days. Barely talking to me, avoiding me, what's going on?" I paused for a moment, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to lay it all out right then and there, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I blew up, she'd just go on the defensive. "Just work stress," I lied, keeping my tone flat. She didn't buy it. "Work stress? Come on, Jack. This is more than that. Did I do something wrong? If something's bothering you, just tell me." Her voice sounded so sincere that, for a second, I almost believed her. Almost. I turned to look at her, studying her face for any cracks in her mask. "Are you sure there's nothing you want to tell me?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "It means I'm asking if there's anything you've been keeping from me. Anything at all." Her expression shifted, just for a split second, but I caught it. A flicker of panic, quickly masked by confusion. "No," she said, her voice steady but her eyes a little too wide. "I don't know what you're talking about." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. "Okay. Just making sure." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I walked past her, heading upstairs to check on the kids. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral. I knew I was walking a tightrope now. She was suspicious, and if I pushed too hard, she'd realize I was onto her. But her reaction confirmed what I already knew: there was something she wasn't telling me. The next morning, Greg called with an update. "I've been digging into their history, and it looks like this didn't start recently," he said. "How far back are we talking?" I asked, bracing myself. "Years," Greg said. "At least 4, maybe 5. They've been careful, but there are signs: frequent meetups, shared locations on their phones, and overlapping travel schedules. I'm piecing it together now, but it's clear this wasn't a one-time thing. 4 to 5 years. That meant their affair might have started before Ethan was born." The thought hit me like a freight train, and I had to sit down before my legs gave out. "Do you have enough evidence to prove it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Greg said. "I'll send you the full report tonight." I thanked him and hung up, staring at the floor in stunned silence. The years of betrayal, the lies, it all felt suffocating. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. Once Greg's report arrived, I would confront her, no matter how ugly it got. And if the paternity test came back confirming my worst fear? Well, that would be a conversation I wasn't sure I could handle. By the time Greg's report landed in my inbox that night, I could barely keep my hands steady. I opened the email on my laptop, and there it was, a comprehensive timeline of Anna and Mike's meetings over the years. It was worse than I imagined. Hotel stays, late-night meetups, and overlapping work trips. Even small, damning details like receipts for dinners at restaurants neither of them had mentioned. But what shook me most was the consistency. They hadn't just snuck around once or twice, it was an ongoing, calculated betrayal that spanned years. I printed the report, each page feeling heavier than the last. By the time I finished, I had a small stack of papers detailing the affair, along with the hotel photos Greg had taken over the weekend. I stared at the stack for a long time, wondering how I'd ever thought our life was normal. I loved Anna. I trusted her. And Mike? He was like a brother to me. The sound of my phone buzzing snapped me out of it. It was the lab. My stomach twisted as I picked up. "This is Jack," I said, my voice tight. "Mr. Allen, this is Dr. Lasky from Family Genetics. We've completed the paternity analysis and uploaded the results to your account." My heart felt like it was going to stop. "Thanks," I said quickly, ending the call. Logging into the lab's website, I clicked on the results. My hands trembled as I scrolled down to the conclusion. Probability of paternity, 0%. The words stared back at me like a slap across the face. I reread them, hoping I'd made a mistake, but the result was clear. Ethan wasn't my biological son. I leaned back in my chair, the air knocked out of me. Ethan, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, called my son, was Mike's child. A wave of emotions hit me all at once: rage, sorrow, disbelief. I wanted to scream, to punch a hole in the wall, but all I could do was sit there, staring at the screen as my life unraveled. Eventually, I stood up, walked to Ethan's room, and looked in on him. He was asleep, clutching his stuffed dinosaur like he always did. Tears blurred my vision as I knelt by his bed. No matter what the test said, he was my son. I had raised him, loved him, and that wasn't going to change. But Anna and Mike. They had stolen something from me that I could never get back. I knew what I had to do. I spent the night replaying everything in my head: the hotel stays, the timeline from Greg, the paternity results. By morning, I felt a grim sense of clarity. It was time to confront Anna. The kids were at school, and Anna was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee and scrolling on her phone like it was any other day. I stood in the doorway, holding the folder with all the evidence. "Anna," I said, my voice low but steady. She looked up, surprised. "Hey, what's up? You okay?" "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the table. Her smile faltered. What's going on? Just sit, I repeated, my tone leaving no room for argument. She set her mug down and took a seat, her hands fidgeting. I placed the folder on the table in front of her and sat down across from her. What's this? She asked, reaching for it. Go ahead, I said. Take a look. She opened the folder, her face pale as she flipped through the pages. The hotel invoices, Greg's photos, the timeline, it was all there. What is this? She whispered, her voice shaking. You tell me, I said, my anger barely contained. You and Mike. For years. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. Jack, it's not. Don't, I interrupted, slamming my hand on the table. Don't lie to me. I have the proof, Anna. All of it. The hotels, the dates, the receipts. I know. She froze, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen, she stammered. I let out a bitter laugh. Didn't mean for it to happen. For years, Anna. For years of sneaking around, lying to my face, making me feel like a fool. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. Over and over again. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I'm so sorry, Jack. I never wanted to hurt you. Spare me the apologies, I snapped. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, do you even understand what you've done? Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. And Ethan, I continued, my voice breaking. He's Mike's, isn't he? Her head shot up, panic in her eyes. What? No. Jack, he's your son. No, he's not, I said, pulling out the paternity results and throwing them on the table. I had the test done, Anna. Don't insult me by lying about this too. She stared at the paper, her face crumpling. Jack, please, she whispered. He's still your son. You've been his father his whole life. I clenched my fists, fighting back the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Don't you dare try to use that to excuse what you did. You and Mike took that choice away from me. You stole it. And now you expect me to just, what? Pretend everything's fine. Jack, I love you, she pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled back like her touch burned. You don't love me. You love whatever version of me let you get away with this for so long. For a moment, the room was silent except for her crying. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I'm filing for divorce, I said coldly. And I'm going to fight for custody of the kids. You and Mike can figure out how to explain this to everyone else. Her sobs turned into a wail, but I didn't stay to hear it. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and into the cold air outside, feeling like I'd left a part of myself behind. The truth was out, but the battle was just beginning. By the time I stepped back into the house that evening, the weight of the day was crushing me. Anna hadn't moved from the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up when I walked in, but I didn't acknowledge her. Instead, I went straight to Ethan and Abby's rooms to check on them. They were my anchor now, the only thing keeping me from spiraling completely. When I kissed Ethan's forehead, he stirred and mumbled, "Night, Dad." His little voice cracked something inside me. No matter what the DNA test said, he was my son, and I wouldn't let anyone take him from me. Anna was waiting for me when I came back downstairs. Jack, she started, her voice hoarse. We need to talk. I sat down across from her, keeping my face blank. Talk. I know I can't undo what I've done, she said, her hands twisting nervously. But I'm begging you, don't destroy this family. The kids, they need you. They need stability, I said flatly. Something you clearly don't care about. Her lip quivered, but she didn't argue. I made a mistake, she whispered. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But Jack, I love you. I love our family. I let out a bitter laugh. Don't use that word. Love? You don't get to say that after what you've done. Love doesn't look like sneaking off to hotels with my best friend. Love doesn't look like lying to my face for years. She flinched but didn't interrupt. I'm filing for divorce, I continued, my voice hard. The papers are being prepared. You'll be served soon. Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. I'm also fighting for custody of Ethan and Abby. You've proven you can't put them first. And as for Mike, my voice faltered for a second, but I pushed through. I'll make sure he knows exactly what he's done. Jack, please, she sobbed. Don't take the kids from me. They're my life. They were supposed to be ours, I shot back, standing up. But you ruined that. You made your choice, Anna. Now you'll live with the consequences. I left her there, broken and crying on the couch, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily, though. My mind raced with everything still left to do, talking to my lawyer, preparing for the inevitable showdown with Mike, and most importantly, protecting my kids. The next morning, I made the call I'd been dreading but knew I couldn't avoid. Mike picked up on the second ring. Jack. Hey, man, what's up? His voice was cheerful, like nothing was wrong. You and I need to talk, I said coldly. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the shift in his tone. Sure. What about? You know exactly what about, I said. Meet me at the park. 10 minutes. I hung up before he could respond. When I arrived at the park, Mike was already there, leaning against his car. He looked uneasy, fidgeting with his keys. Jack, what's going on? He asked, forcing a nervous smile. I didn't bother with small talk. I walked right up to him and threw the folder at his chest. He caught it awkwardly, his face going pale as he flipped through the pages. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice low but trembling with anger. Jack. He stammered, backing away slightly. You've been sleeping with my wife for years, I said, my voice rising. And Ethan? He's your son, isn't he? Mike's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. Say it. I yelled, my fists clenched. Yes, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, he's mine. The confession hit me harder than I expected, even though I already knew. I took a step closer, my hands shaking. You were supposed to be my best friend, I said, my voice cracking. How could you do this to me? To my family? I'm sorry, he said weakly. I didn't mean for it to happen. I let out a bitter laugh. You didn't mean for it to happen. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? Mike looked down, his guilt written all over his face. But guilt wasn't enough, not even close. I'm done with you, I said, my voice cold. Don't come near me, don't come near my house, and don't even think about seeing Ethan. You don't deserve him. I turned and walked away, leaving Mike standing there, his face pale and his shoulders slumped. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and carefully chosen words around the kids. I hadn't told them anything yet, I couldn't. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old that their world is about to fall apart? Anna tried to talk to me several times, but I shut her down every time. There was nothing left to say. Whatever love or trust we'd had was gone, shattered beyond repair. I stayed civil for the kids, but beyond that, I was ice. The divorce papers were served that Friday. Anna broke down again when she read them, pleading with me to reconsider, but I was done. This wasn't just about the affair or even the paternity test, it was about the years of lies. As for Mike, I stuck to my word. I didn't let him near the house or the kids. He texted me a few times, trying to explain, trying to apologize, but I ignored him. The man I'd once called my best friend was dead to me. Ethan was the hardest part. I'd scheduled a session with a child therapist to help me figure out how to handle the situation. I couldn't just drop the truth on him, it wasn't fair. For now, he didn't need to know that Mike was his biological father. Because Ethan was my son. I'd raised him, loved him, taught him right from wrong. DNA didn't change that. One night, as I was tucking him into bed, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes and said, "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" The question caught me off guard, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "Why do you ask that, buddy?" "You don't talk to her much anymore," he said, frowning. "Did she do something bad?" I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to fix," I said carefully. "But no matter what, I'll always be here for you and Abby." "Okay." He nodded, seeming satisfied, and snuggled into his blanket. "Okay. I love you, Dad." "I love you too," I said, my throat tight. As I closed his door, I realized that no matter how much pain Anna and Mike had caused, I still had my kids. And they still had me. The divorce was finalized a few months later. I was granted primary custody, with Anna getting weekends and supervised visits for the first 6 months. She tried to argue against it, but the evidence Greg provided, along with the paternity revelation, had painted a clear picture of her priorities. Mike didn't contest anything. He disappeared from our lives, and as far as I was concerned, he could stay gone. Life wasn't easy after that. Co-parenting with Anna was awkward at best, but we made it work for the kids. I focused on rebuilding, my career, my routine, my sense of self. One day, about a year after everything had unfolded, Ethan and Abby were playing in the yard when Ethan called out, "Dad, watch this." I looked up just in time to see him nail a perfect kick into the soccer goal we'd set up. His face lit up with pride, and in that moment, all the heartbreak and anger faded into the background. Because no matter what the past held, the future was mine to shape. And I wasn't going to let the mistakes of others define it.